শুভ সন্ধ্যা সবাইকে আমন্ত্রণ জানাচ্ছি আজকের আলাপচারিতায়। ঈদের পরে আমরা আবার আমাদের নিয়মিত অনুষ্ঠানমালায় ফিরে এসেছি এবং তারই সুবাদে আজকে আমাদের নিয়মিত আয়োজন শুক্রবারের আলাপচারিতা। যারা বসেছেন টেলিভিশনের সেটের সামনে তাদেরকে একটু বিলেটেড ঈদের শুভেচ্ছা এবং অনুষ্ঠান দেখবার জন্যে আবারও ধন্যবাদ। আজকে আমরা একজন বিশেষ ব্যক্তিত্বকে আমন্ত্রণ জানিয়েছি আমাদের স্টুডিওতে। এই ব্যক্তিটি তার রাজনৈতিক যাত্রায় আমাদের ব্রিটিশ বাংলাদেশি কমিউনিটির মুখ উজ্জ্বল করেছেন। আমাদের বিলেতে বাঙালি কমিউনিটির ইতিহাসে মাইল ফলক হিসেবে বিলেতের রাজনীতিতে তার পদচারণা অবশ্যই আমাদের জন্যে একটি অত্যন্ত আশার কথা এবং আমরা বিশ্বাস করি যে তার হাত ধরে বিলেতের মেইনস্ট্রিম রাজনীতিতে আমাদের আরও অনেক বাঙালির আগমন ঘটবে। তার পথ চলার শুরু অনেক চড়াই উতরাই পেরিয়ে, যেহেতু এই প্রথম বিলেতের মতন গণতন্ত্রের পাদপীঠে একজন বাঙালি রমণী মেইনস্ট্রিম রাজনীতিতে তার অবস্থান পাকাপোক্ত করেছেন। সুতরাং অবশ্যই সেই সংগ্রাম অতটা সহজ ছিল না, কিন্তু সেই কঠিন সংগ্রামকে উইন করে তিনি আজকে বিলেতের পার্লামেন্টে অবস্থান করেছেন। তার পথ চলা এই সময়টাতে কেমন ছিল, পাশাপাশি আগামী নির্বাচনের জন্যে তার প্রস্তুতি কতখানি, সব কিছু নিয়ে এবং আন্তর্জাতিক এবং বাংলাদেশের রাজনীতিতে কী ধরনের অবস্থান তিনি রাখছেন, সব বিষয় নিয়ে কথা হবে আজকে আপনাদের সম্মুখে। তাকে নিয়ে তিনি হচ্ছেন আমাদের প্রথম বাঙালি মহিলা এমপি রোশনারা আলী। লন্ডন বরো অফ টাউন হ্যামলেটসের বেথনাল গ্রিন বো এলাকা থেকে প্রথম নির্বাচিত এমপি রোশনারা আলী। থ্যাংক ইউ রোশনারা ফর গিভিং আস টাইম।
Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum and Eid Mubarak, belated Eid Mubarak to you and your viewers as well.
Same to you, same to you. Thank you for coming. I know you've been very busy, and especially in recent weeks, things have been so difficult for British politics as well as international politics, and you've been very busy. But I thank you for giving us the time, because this is also very important time for the British Bangladeshi community in terms of the Gaza situation. So obviously we will start with Gaza.
Yes, of course.
Okay. So what's your reaction to the government response to Gaza?
Well, first of all, I think what's happening is in Gaza and the Israeli incursion and the attacks in response to the conflict and the attacks that have been going on for a long time is completely unacceptable. Nearly 2,000 people, the vast majority of civilians, have been killed, and 500,000 people have been displaced seeking shelter. Even the UN schools have been attacked by the Israeli Defense Force. And I made it very clear right at the outset in Parliament, to the Foreign Secretary first and then directly to the Prime Minister, that the actions of the Israeli Defense Force and the Israeli government was disproportionate in terms of international law and humanitarian law. And I called on our Prime Minister to show courage and leadership. He has failed to do that, and he consistently fails to do that. That is unacceptable, and the international community needs to lead and bring an end to this conflict and have a longer-term ceasefire and return to negotiation.
Okay, Roshana, I'll come back to you. I do apologize. দর্শক, আমাদেরকে আজানের বিরতিতে যেতে হচ্ছে। ফিরে আসবো খুব শিগগিরই, আমাদের সঙ্গে থাকুন। শুভ সন্ধ্যা যারা এইমাত্র আমাদের সঙ্গে যোগ দিলেন। আমরা বিরতির পর ফিরে এসেছি। আমাদের সঙ্গে আমাদের আজকের অতিথি রোশনারা আলী এমপি। বিরতিতে যাবার আগে তার কাছে আমার প্রশ্ন ছিল, what has been her reaction to the response that British government has so far given towards the Gaza situation? You're explaining how disgusting and how disappointing the responses were so far.
Well, I think that what I said, and I said this in the Houses of Parliament to David Cameron directly, is that in 2010 he rightly said that Gaza was like an open prison camp, and expressed horror at the treatment of Palestinians in Gaza.
Absolutely.
And Palestinians across the West Bank. I visited the West Bank in 2011. I saw firsthand the appalling conditions under which people live in, day out, the humiliation people face, not to mention the exclusions and the appalling human rights violations in the West Bank, never mind in Gaza. But he has changed his tunes dramatically, and despite the fact that hundreds of people were being killed, now nearly 2,000, and thousands displaced, the vast majority of them civilians, he has failed to condemn the attacks. He has failed to recognize that the attacks, which have been primarily on civilians, is disproportionate, and he has failed to question the legality. The leader of the Labour Party went to Washington and discussed this matter and highlighted his objection to the incursion in the international community. To President Obama, he discussed these issues and called on President Obama to lead negotiations to end this conflict and return to negotiations. David Cameron is the Prime Minister. My party leader is the leader of the opposition, and he's leading on this matter. And David Cameron is failing completely.
What's your view in terms of the resignation of Baroness Warsi?
Well,
how does that play in terms of this equation?
Well, I mean, I know Baroness Warsi as a fellow parliamentarian, and when I heard that she has decided to resign, what I know from discussions I've had with ministers when I have said your party is failing to act to the Foreign Secretary in public and to ministers, government ministers, is that they seem to have their hands tied because their leader has decided to not condemn the incursion. And what is clear is that she was not being listened to. Her warnings, her concerns were falling on deaf ears. That is a direct contrast to the position of my colleagues and I, who have been campaigning for a very long time on Palestinian issues and who have been raising these issues with our leadership. She has not been listened to, and she obviously felt that she didn't have a choice but to resign. And my party and I fully support the decision that she has made, because her Prime Minister, our Prime Minister actually, her party leader, has completely failed to show leadership. And the British Prime Minister has a very important role to play, because Britain has a history in this region, and it was the British who made those decisions in the first place. So we have a unique role to play, and a very important role for our Prime Minister to play a neutral, honest broker. I believe he's failed to do that, and I welcome her resignation, but basically it's a consequence of the fact that the Conservative government have not made the right call on this issue, and we need to make sure that the Conservative Party and the government are held to account over this matter.
Do you think this issue will go in favour of Labour, how Labour has taken a strong step in terms of supporting people in Palestine?
Well, the reason why the Labour Party and my party leader has taken the stance that he has done is it's about seeking justice. It's about speaking up for people who are people who have been oppressed for generations, since the Nakba, since the occupation of Palestinian territories. And it's about speaking up against injustice. It's about saying the international community has a role to bring an end to the conflict, to quite rightly condemn the attacks, the rocket attacks, as well as the Israeli disproportionate response. And this isn't the first time that Gaza has been attacked. This is the third attack on Gaza in as many as 7 years, not to mention the successive conflicts in the West Bank. So it is about doing the right thing. It is about speaking up. And that's what the Labour leader, Ed Miliband, and Labour shadow ministers, including myself and other colleagues, have done. And we will continue to do so. But not only have we been speaking up in Parliament, we've been marching with people, British people. I attended the first march. I will be attending the march tomorrow with my constituents to speak up and speak for those who are being oppressed in the West Bank and, of course, in Gaza.
That was my next question. How you're taking your constituents in terms of protesting against this issue? Because people of Tower Hamlets have been very vocal in terms of supporting the people and stopping this aggression against the Palestinians. So how have you, what is your plan to take your constituents along? Well,
I attended the protest. I spoke at it, the Palestinian Solidarity Campaign that I support. I am a member of the all-party parliamentary group on the Middle East and also Labour Friends of Palestine. So those of us who are members have led the way in speaking up, speaking out against what's been happening both in Parliament and in those rallies. And we will be joining forces with everybody that joins us tomorrow, whatever party they belong to campaign and speak up for the people of Palestine, the people of Gaza. What's absolutely vital, and I really welcome what people have done in supporting petitions, in writing to their members of parliament, in making sure their voices are heard, because that gives us an enormous amount of support to keep the pressure up and work with the public to speak up for those who are being oppressed and those who are suffering right now.
Do you have any other advice that we can kind of take part so that that would create that extra pressure on the government?
Well, I call on anybody watching this programme to join me tomorrow. The march will begin in Portland Place outside the BBC, and people will be heading to Hyde Park Corner, and there will be speeches. There will be thousands and thousands of people hopefully attending tomorrow, and I very much hope that people from my constituency and across the country, not only from the British Bangladeshi community and the British Muslim community, but from many other communities who will be joining. And I very much hope that they will be joining what will be an important campaign, an important protest. And, you know, what's important is that we all demonstrate peacefully to raise our objections to what's happening and show solidarity, which many of us have been doing, and I have been doing for a very long time, as well as a parliamentarian, and my colleagues have been doing and will be joining tomorrow. And I know many MPs will be joining tomorrow. I know for a fact Shabana Mahmood, Yasmin Qureshi, and many other members of parliament from my side will be joining me tomorrow.
Okay, let's move on to another international topic as such, sort of, you know, UK's response, UK government's response and your party's response in terms of the the new elected government in Bangladesh. How do you see that?
Well, the UK government made very clear that along with the European Union and Baroness Ashton, who is the High Representative on Foreign Affairs in the European Union, a Labour baroness, although of course that role is a governmental role at the EU level, made it very clear that because this election wasn't contested by the major opposition party, that they felt that this election needed to be rerun, and that it was important that these elections are held in a free and fair way when that happens. And I know that the UK government and my party has also highlighted those issues. And as soon as the election took place, afterwards, we had a debate in Parliament where those messages were relayed. What's really important is that Bangladesh has, as soon as possible, moved towards free and fair elections, and that the country has stability and can work with people from all different backgrounds, but also at a political level,
but
that those conflicts are resolved.
You do have a good relationship with Army League government. You have visited Bangladesh before, and in terms of this recent visit of Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina to UK for the Gulf Summit. We have seen her meeting with David Cameron, and David Cameron he did say that current government do accept this being a legitimate government. They are in power, and they like to see working in partnership with UK government.
Well, I have a very good relationship with the leader of the current government, Sheikh Hasina, and also the opposition leader and former Prime Minister, Begum Khaleda Zia. And I believe that what's really important, and my party does too, successive prime ministers in my party have worked closely with whichever side has been in power and have had strong constructive relationships in the past. And I think what's important is that as a Member of Parliament for Bethnal Green and Bow, as a British parliamentarian, I have strong relationships, good working relationships, and my party has good relationships with the leadership, with all the major political parties, and that's the spirit in which I work. So we have had successively, my party leader and I and other parliamentarians in my party, including the Shadow Foreign Secretary, have had meetings. Former Prime Minister Gordon Brown and I met with Begum Khaleda Zia when she came to the UK, as well as the Prime Minister of Bangladesh, before the recent election and more recently. So we try from the UK as parliamentarians and of course the leaders of these parties, our parties, to have constructive dialogue to highlight the concerns that the British parliamentarians have, but also British Bangladeshis have about the situation, particularly on governance in Bangladesh. We have done that. We have done that on numerous occasions.
Labour Party has a very good relationship with Awami League, because we remember Peter Shore MP for Tower Hamlets had actually took a very strong stand in relation to the Liberation War. He was a friend of Bangladesh Liberation at that time. So do you find Bangladesh, the current government's this stance on election, this last election, in terms of which was not contested by the major opposition party, a little embarrassing for the Labour Party?
Well, look, the idea that just because, and rightly, my party led the way, led by Peter Shore, the late Peter Shore, for Bangladesh independence. I'm really proud of the fact that the Labour Party and Labour MPs campaigned with the British Bangladeshi community, with people like my father and many from my father and mother's generation for Bangladeshi independence. And want to see Bangladesh do well. And my party has worked with both sides to make sure that we have a strong, constructive working relationship. But it's not blind support with any party. It's about making sure we act as strong, critical friends and partners of Bangladesh. So that is the basis on which we work. And I think that's what the British Bangladeshi community would expect and want, and that's what the British population as a whole would expect and want of our foreign policy and our relationship, not only with Bangladesh, but other countries.
Okay. What's your take on the trial of war criminals?
Well, this is a matter for the government and the judiciary of Bangladesh. I know that there have been many concerns raised about the legitimacy of those trials, and those have been highlighted at the international level by those who are unhappy about the trials, and equally by the government and the judiciary in terms of their perspective. But ultimately, this is a matter for Bangladesh. This is a matter for the legal system of Bangladesh. What's important, of course, is that, and we've made that very clear, is that international standards and due process are where these trials take place. If they are being measured by international standards, that they are followed accordingly. If they are domestic legal cases, if they are within the domestic legal framework, that is a matter for the domestic government. It's not, but we have made very clear that what's vital is that these are processes that are proper and that are within the legal framework of of the country concerned. But beyond that, I don't think it would be appropriate for me to get into judicial matters of another country. Ultimately,
okay. Do you have any intention to observe the trial in Bangladesh, because a significant number of your constituents have been concerned about this trial?
My job is to represent the people of my constituency, and when they have raised their concerns, I have highlighted those in Parliament to government ministers in the UK, and that representation has to be made from our government, and I know that has been the case. Now, the government of the day in the UK is not a Labour government. It's a Conservative government. So I can try and that's what I do. I can feed in the perspectives and concerns, and I do, to the government, and then it's their decision what they choose to do. They will have a different approach in some issues to my party, the Labour Party. In other issues, there may be commonality, for instance, in the case of the recent elections. Now, you asked earlier a question about David Cameron's response in the recent visit. That is a matter for David Cameron, and that's a question you should pose to David Cameron and his party.
Absolutely, if I get the chance, if I get the chance
with him, I very much hope you do.
If we remain in Bangladesh issue for a little while, in terms of the situation that we saw in relation to the garments factory workers in Bangladesh, the Savar Rana Plaza situation, and following on from there on, we have seen number of disasters within the garments factory before and still after. So as a member of parliament, what has been your contribution to address especially these issues, to ensure that injustice, oppressions are being actually addressed, taking into consideration that some of these big factories are actually British factories, like the takers, like Primark, and various other Topshop, and those kind of big buyers are British companies, and this is what's happening in Bangladesh. You being very close, this country being very close to your heart, what has been your contribution?
Well, first of all, I was absolutely horrified, as were so many people. Not only the British Bangladeshi community, of course it was particularly horrifying for us, but also for anyone who watched those images of almost 1,100 people who lost their lives in that appalling, unnecessary accident.
That was one. We had seen before and still see those kinds of disasters.
So after I was elected, one of the first things I did was go to Bangladesh as Shadow International Development Minister. And one of the first things I did was go and meet garments workers in the slums of Dhaka, where they were living, to see what their lives were like, and to push the multinational companies to sort out their labour standards, because I was very concerned about that situation. And as a Shadow Development Minister, this is one of the issues that I worked on with the International Labour Organization. We raised those alarm bells many years ago when there were accidents, smaller scale, but cost many lives, not as many as last year, but significant, in Bangladesh, in Pakistan, and other parts of the world. And I constantly asked the UK government to work towards improving labour standards. The first thing the Conservative-led government did when they came into power is take money away from the International Labour Standards Organisation. We campaigned to make sure they return that money, because those organisations are responsible for helping to improve conditions in factories around the world. And also they are responsible and play a very important role in unionising workers, so they can speak up against employers who force them into working under appalling conditions or under conditions in factories that are unsafe. Now, what we have done is work to make sure that the UK government returns money back to organisations that can achieve that. Now, there's a second issue, which is that despite the warnings, despite the alarm bells, the international community has not done enough at the UN level to enforce the requirements for decent labour standards around the world. And this is where the European Union and the United Nations can play a bigger role in making sure governments in those countries improve the building conditions, the engineering regulations, so that the conditions in which companies operate are improved. The second issue is your point about multinational companies, Western companies, who can sometimes, as is the case in some of these high-profile examples, be complicit in these appalling conditions. They must not, and I said this before this accident happened, they must not turn a blind eye to the appalling conditions under which those factories exist, where they have garments workers that they are contracting people to work. Do
you think things have changed?
Well, what's happening, and this is where it's critical, because Bangladesh has a very important dependence on the garment sector. What's important is that the conditions and the safety standards are improved, so that companies, when the world's media is not looking, don't go off to the next country where there's not going to be pressure on them to improve conditions, and more people get exploited. And of course, the jobs that women in particular rely on, 85% of the people who work in the garments industry in Bangladesh are women, that they end up in further poverty and at further risk because they can't get jobs. So the conditions need to be improved. I have joined a campaign, it's called Labour Behind the Labels, and numerous other campaigns to get compensation. Our target is to raise £40 million, and we have raised substantial amounts of that, so that those people, those families who have lost loved ones, who've been injured, get the compensation that they need. But the other thing we did, I led an inquiry team of parliamentarians as the vice chair of the all-party parliamentary group on Bangladesh, and 6 of us, members of parliament, both from the Labour Party and the Conservative Party, 4 Labour MPs, 2 Conservative MPs, including the chair of the all-party group. We went to Bangladesh to lead an inquiry into the garments sector and the accidents, and we met with the British companies who are responsible and who are trading there, looked at their conditions and what they're doing to improve conditions. We then came back and published a report, a very lengthy report, and we called on the UK government to pay for engineers to go in there to improve building standards, and that's what's happening at the moment. We pushed the government to put something like £20 million immediately in order to improve standards, building standards. Now, so this is the part that the UK government, because of our pressure, is honouring. There is a role for the government of Bangladesh. It is ultimately their responsibility to make sure building regulations are observed, and that in that accident, when the inspectors went in and warned the owners, they did not let people leave those buildings. Absolutely. So they were sent to certain death. That is the responsibility of whichever party is in government in Bangladesh to make sure that never happens again. The British government can't go there, and British parliamentarians can't go there and stand watch over. So it's a combined effort of partnership between multinational companies that invest there. They have to be ethical traders and investors and accountable to us, and we are holding them to account here in the UK through committees, public account committees in the House, in the House of Commons, and through inquiries, and through the labour standards. We're calling on international regulations to be better improved, but the government of Bangladesh has to play its part, and also the public in Bangladesh need to apply pressure on their government as well as the companies, both domestic companies. The part we haven't talked about is it's not only the multinational companies, it's domestic traders as well. Absolutely,
absolutely. I've got quite a few issues to cover, so I'm just rushing a little bit. Yeah. In terms of the recent education controversy that we have seen versus Michael Gove and Theresa May, you took a strong stand in terms of failure to stop the rise of extremism in schools. What's your take on it? Because lots of Muslim schools have been identified where concerns are raised about rise of extremism in those schools.
Well, I think Michael Gove was appalling in the way he dealt with this issue. And I said so in the Houses of Parliament. His approach was to whip up hysteria and fear in the media and in the wider public. Now, that's not to say there weren't legitimate complaints that were made by certain people in the case of Birmingham. And that investigation was set up, and that should have happened without Michael Gove and Theresa May having a public row about a national security matter, and which led to the British Muslim community being vilified in certain sections of the media. And that is unacceptable, and it's wrong and irresponsible.
We'll
and
have
that's
that discussion.
That's what Michael Gove was doing.
Okay.
And
sorry
he's no longer in his job.
Don't worry, we'll come back to you on that. দর্শক ছোট্ট বিজ্ঞাপন বিরতির পর আমরা আমাদের আলোচনায় ফিরে আসছি। Stay tuned with ATN Bangla UK. বিজ্ঞাপন বিরতির পর আমরা আজকের অনুষ্ঠানের শেষ পর্বে পৌঁছে গেছি। আমরা কথা বলছি এমপি রোশনারা আলীর সঙ্গে। We have talked about quite a few important issues. Let's now move on to an issue that is also very, very important. What has been your focus in terms of the local issues in Tower Hamlets? So, election is coming. You have started your preparation. So, what are the local issues you're focusing on in terms of health? You're working on health issues in terms of Tower Hamlets. We know that you're leading the campaign against stopping all these GP surgeries being closed. What else have you been doing?
Well, I've been, as you know...
For the benefit of our viewers, let's have this conversation in Bengali.
In Bangla,
yeah.
Okay. আমি আমার ইলেকশনের পর থেকে হাউজিং, হেলথ, এমপ্লয়মেন্ট, এডুকেশনের উপরে as well as my international development brief এটার এইরকম ইস্যুর উপরে অনেক কাজ করছি। প্রথম আমি ইলেকশনের পরে 100 মিলিয়ন পাউন্ড সিকিউর করছি যে ডিসেন্ট হোমস প্রোগ্রামের লাগে। এটা এখন পর্যন্ত ইমপ্লিমেন্ট করা লোকাল কাউন্সিলে করা, এটা ঠিক মতো কাজ অনেক কমপ্লেন্ট আছে, এটা লোকালি করা লাগবে।
Secondly, is that going to address the housing issue in Tower Hamlets?
Not completely. আমার পার্টি আমরা অলরেডি আমরা কমিটমেন্ট দিছি যদি আমরা নেক্সট লেবার গভর্নমেন্ট ফর্ম করতাম পারি নেক্সট মে, তখন আমরা 200,000 বাসা বানাইমু যেটা অ্যাফোর্ডেবল রেন্টেড, মানে সোশ্যাল হাউজিং। আর এখন যেটা বানানিওর অনেক কথা কয় যে হাজার হাজার ঘর বাড়ি বানানি হয়েছে, কনজারভেটিভ গভর্নমেন্টেও হয়, লোকালিও কথা কয়, কিন্তু এটা বাসা মেজরিটি প্রাইভেট সেলের জন্য, মানে 500,000 1 মিলিয়ন ওরকম আমার এলাকার। এটাকে অফোর্ড করার না, পারা যায় না, সবাই মেজরিটি পারতা নাই। তখন আমরা প্রায়োরিটি লোক 200,000 বাসা বানানোর জন্য সোশ্যাল হাউজিং, কারণ ওভারক্রাউডিং অনেক বেশি। Secondly, আমরা যে বিল্ডিং স্কুলস ফর ফিউচার প্রোগ্রাম যেটা আমরা লেবার গভর্নমেন্টে ইন্ট্রোডিউস করছেন, এটা কমপ্লিট করা হয়েছে টাওয়ার হ্যামলেটসও। কারণ আমরা ইলেকশনের পর থেকে আমি জিম ফিটসপ্যাট্রিককে আমার লেবার কলিগস যারা সবাই গভর্নমেন্টে প্রেশার দিয়া এটা ফাইনাল রিসোর্স যেটা বাকি রয়েছিল এটা আমরা ঢুকাইছি টাওয়ার হ্যামলেটসও। তার জন্য সব স্কুল মডার্নাইজ করা হয়েছে ওভার the period that Labour was in government, and the final work was completed over the recent years. So these are important achievements because when a Conservative Party is in power and you are the Labour MP, you have to work twice as hard to convince them to give money to your area. So I've worked very hard to release that money. Now, the area that I've been particularly focused on lately is on health, because of GP surgeries being at risk of closure. Amrar Borough, Tower Hamlets Borough, Fashta GP surgery, government announced korse tara close korbo. East London, 22টা, 22. Nationally, 100. একশোটা। এটার উপরে আমরা পার্লামেন্টও প্রাইম মিনিস্টার কোয়েশ্চেনও আমি এটা রেজ করছি যে এই ডিসিশন খুব খারাপ, কারণ 30,000 মানুষ টাওয়ার হ্যামলেটসও আসলে তারা জিপি সার্জারি ক্লোজ হইব। এটা কনজারভেটিভ গভর্নমেন্টের ডিসিশনে তারা ডক্টর পাইতা নাই। তখন এই দেশেও আমরা পার্টি ন্যাশনাল হেলথ সার্ভিস মানে বার্থ দিছে, জন্ম দিছে। আর এই গভর্নমেন্টে যতবার তারা পাওয়ার যায় তখন তারা চেষ্টা করে যে প্রাইভেটাইজ করার জন্য NHS রে, এখনও এটা চেষ্টা করে। আর আমরা ডাইরেক্টলি যে যারা আমরা কমিউনিটি যারা জিপি সার্জারি ফার্স্টটা জিপি সার্জারি ক্লোজ করলে তখন ওয়েটিং টাইম আরও বাড়বো এখনও জিপি's অ্যাপয়েন্টমেন্ট পাইতে খুব কষ্ট লাগে সামনে দিয়ে আরও খারাপ সিচুয়েশন হবে তার জন্য আমরা গতকালকে Wednesday আমরা 20,000 petition signature নিয়ে ডক্টরস যারা জিপিস যারা আমরা এলাকার ইস্ট লন্ডন এলাকার ব্রিটিশ মেডিকেল অ্যাসোসিয়েশন রয়্যাল কলেজ অফ জিপিস তারা নিয়ে আমরা চেয়ার জিপিস সিসিজি চেয়ার সবাই নিয়ে আমরা ডাউনিং স্ট্রিট এই পিটিশন ডেলিভার করছি কারণ যেদিন প্রেশার ঢুকায় না তখন তারা ক্লোজ করে রাখবো আমরা লিড করলাম এই ক্যাম্পেইন মি অ্যান্ড জিম ফিটসপ্যাট্রিক সারা দেশে ফলো করে আমরা ক্যাম্পেইন কারণ এই যে সিচুয়েশন হয়েছে সামনে দিয়ে আমরা কমিউনিটি যারা হার্ট ডিজিজ ডায়াবেটিস ওবিসিটি অনেক হেলথ প্রবলেম হাই লেভেলস অফ হেলথ ইনইকুয়ালিটি যে এলাকাত বেশ ফান্ডিং ঢুকার জরুরি যেটা আমরা করছি লেবার গভর্নমেন্ট যখন আসছিল এটা তারা উঠে আনের কারণ তারার প্রায়োরিটি হলো গিয়া অন্য এলাকার উপরে মানে লিফি সাবার্বস যেটা তারার কনস্টিটিউয়েন্সি ওই এলাকা this is wrong so I'm campaigning against this and I hope people will join me those who haven't signed the petition should sign the petition and they should write to David Cameron they should write to Jeremy Hunt and explain that this is the wrong decision in one of the areas with high levels of deprivation and health inequalities.
And they can show
they've been writing to me
through the election as well.
Yes, of course. Of course, they have a choice. মানে তারার একটা চয়েস আছে আমরা পাবলিকের চয়েস আছে যে যদিন আমরা ন্যাশনাল হেলথ সার্ভিস বাঁচাইতাম চাই যে আমরা এটা প্রাইভেটাইজ করে না বন্ধ করতাম চাই তখন কনজারভেটিভ গভর্নমেন্ট তাকে উঠানোর জরুরি না নেক্সট টাইম যদি তারা আর একটা টার্ম পায় তখন আমরা হেলথ সার্ভিস একবারে ডিস্ট্রয় করা হইব £3 বিলিয়ন তারা ওয়েস্ট করছে রিঅর্গানাইজ করিয়া আর এই যে ফান্ডিং কাট শুরু হয়েছে নার্সেস ডক্টরস তারা চাকরি থেকে বিদায় করিয়া দেওয়ার
Conservative blames you Labour Party for this overspend, this huge overspend.
The Labour Party established the National Health Service. This is the best and the most cost-effective health service in the world. Even the world's superpower America doesn't have a decent healthcare system. This government is destroying it, and whenever they come into power, they try to privatize it and sell it out.
I don't think there is any doubt about the national health and how beneficial this system is.
This is what's
in terms of conservatives' take that Britain is in this kind of austerity because of your overspend, Labour Party's overspend, and lack of
well, the Conservatives love to rewrite history. The Conservatives love to rewrite history. The fact is that it was under 18 years of Conservative government that they destroyed the fabric of this country in terms of the education system. We had to rebuild it in '97. It took us a generation to rebuild it. That's why you have record improvement. The most improved borough in the country is Tower Hamlets because Labour improved and put hundreds of millions of pounds into education and across London. London is the best performing in education because we invested in education when the Conservative Party wrote off education in this country. Now, the point about the austerity plan and the financial crisis was the reason why there was an economic crisis and a recession. That financial crisis started when there was heavy financial deregulation of the banks, which goes back to the Reagan and Thatcher era, and successive governments, including, Gordon Brown when he was Chancellor, tried to improve regulation, tried to bring more control, but the international community didn't work together to do that. You can't do that in one country alone. The point is, it was the financial crisis that led to the recession, and the Conservatives love to rewrite history to say that it was a Labour government that caused the deficit.
Let's move on to, again, another of your topic that is you're very passionate about, that is supporting young people of your of Tower Hamlets. What has been your take on that?
Well, I've been campaigning for a very long time to get jobs and improve education. I did that as before I got elected. I established charities, I established organisations, and I helped young people to get into jobs directly. And many young people who worked on my campaign, I tried to help to get into employment as well. I feel very passionately about this, and I'm really pleased to be the Shadow Education Minister and Shadow Youth Minister because you still have 870,000 young people in this country who don't have jobs. And my priority and my party's priority is to get them into work. Amra je younger generation jara achen tara lage ami directly leadership development program amar ekta charity establish korchi uprising employment program fast laners eta ei duita program
how that's going to benefit the young people of Town Hamlets?
Yeah, tarare directly ami personally amra train horia tarare job opportunity bitore dukaisi. We have hundreds of young people now in Tower Hamlets, across East London, who are on this program, and in other cities in the UK, in Birmingham, in Luton, in Bedford, in Liverpool, in Manchester. This program is running to help them develop leadership skills as well as employment
Is it for
skills.
the BME community?
It's especially for BME community, but not exclusive to them. The majority are from ethnic minority communities. In London, about 50% are from the British Muslim community and a sizable number from the British Bangladeshi community. But it's open to all communities from backgrounds where they don't have the same connections. I know this very well because when I went to university, I was the first in my family to go to university. When I left, I struggled to find work. So I want to make sure that no young person feels that they're not supported. And my personal connection with this organization is to make sure they get the support, the mentors, the work experience, the work placements, and the job opportunities and know-how so that they can get jobs. And so my party has taken the lessons from charities like Uprising and organizations, projects like Fast Laners to turn that into national policy. So আমি যেটা pilot করছি
এটা আমরা যেটা আমরা দেখি যে একদিকে আমরা Canary Wharf দেখছি, you know, it's prosperity and high flying stuff. On the other side we have got unemployment.
That's why I set up this program.
Girls are doing really well in Marlborough schools, but are they going to, you know, what is their future?
Well, they must, and that's what I've been saying. I want no door closed for our young people. I'm someone who's worked throughout my life to open doors for our young people. And I'm really proud of the fact that we've got hundreds of young people now who are on leadership development programs, who will be the future councillors, the future members of parliament, the future bankers, the future lawyers, the future teachers, and whatever other professions they want to go to. That's what I'm doing directly myself as a constituency MP. And I have convinced my party that those policies should be national Labour government policies. So আমরা এটার পরে আমার পার্টি আমরা কমিটমেন্ট দিছি যে যতটা ইয়াং ছেলেমেয়েরা যতজন আছেন তার প্রপার ক্যারিয়ার অ্যাডভাইস দেওয়া হইব এটার উপরে আমি রেসপন্সিবল দিস পলিসি ওয়ার্ক এক্সপিরিয়েন্স এন্টাইটেলমেন্ট দেওয়া হইব এই গভর্নমেন্ট এটা উঠাইছে সব কিছু আর তারারে যারা ইউনিভার্সিটি যাইতেছেন না তারারে একটা হাই লেভেল প্রেস্টিজিয়াস অ্যাপ্রেন্টিসশিপ প্রোগ্রামও ঢুকানি হইব যেভাবে তারা প্রপার স্কিলস অ্যান্ড ট্রেনিং থাকবো যেটা দিয়া তারা চাকরি পাইব তারপরে হায়ার অ্যাপ্রেন্টিসশিপ যদি চান তারা ইউনিভার্সিটি লেভেলের সমান লেভেলও হায়ার অ্যাপ্রেন্টিসশিপ করতে পারবো করার পরে তারা বালা একটা ক্যারিয়ার প্রোগ্রেশন থাকবো Other countries have very good vocational education systems along with academic. We need the same because not everybody chooses to go to university. 50% of this country go to university, the other 50% don't, and they don't have the support that they need. My party leader calls them the forgotten 50%. He appointed me to work to make sure that 50% have the same opportunities as those who go to university. And that's what we're going to do.
আমাদের বাঙালি কমিউনিটিতে 50% এর মধ্যে একটা বড় চাঙ্ক আছে যে that will fall under within that 50% who would prefer to have some support in terms of vocational training.
Exactly. So is a conservative government ঢুকিয়ে তারা higher education fees 9,000 পর্যন্ত করছে আমরা যখন আসলাম আমরা ক্যাপ করিয়ে রাখছি 3,000 কিন্তু যে ফ্যামিলির ফাইন্যান্স নাই তারারে গ্রান্ট দেওয়া হয়েছে তারার মেইনটেন্যান্স দেওয়া হয়েছে সাপোর্ট দেওয়া হয়েছে এটা সব কিছু ওঠানি হয়েছে আমরা কমিটমেন্ট দিছি যে এই যে ফাইন্যান্সিয়াল সিস্টেম যেটা আছে এটা আনফেয়ার এটা আমরা চেঞ্জ করবো গ্র্যাজুয়েট ট্যাক্স দিয়ে রিপ্লেস করবো তখন যারা হাই আর্নার হয় ডিগ্রি করার পরে তারা দিতে পারবো দেওয়া লাগবো কিন্তু বাকি সব যারা আছেন তারা দেওয়া লাগতো না so this is a fairer system than what the Conservative government have done. The second point I would highlight is that we have committed, absolutely, to giving every young person a jobs guarantee. Every young person in Tower Hamlets who doesn't have a job will have a guaranteed job after training under a Labour government. Our party এটা commitment করছে যে কোনো ছেলেমেয়েরা খাস ছাড়া আমরা খাস সব ছেলেমেয়েরা খাসের অপরচুনিটি দেওয়া হইব। কারেন্ট গভর্নমেন্টে যেটা করছে যে কোনো ট্রেনিং ঠিকমতো ট্রেনিং দেওয়া হয় না, এডুকেশনও যারা ইউনিভার্সিটি যাইতে চায় তারার উপরে অনেক কষ্ট বাড়ানি হয়েছে। অনেক ফ্যামিলি আমার সবসময় মা বাবাই কমপ্লেন করেন যে তারা ছেলেমেয়েরা হাই ডেট যেটা ডেট প্যাটার্ন যেটা আছে এটার জন্য অনেক আছে তারা এখন ইউনিভার্সিটি যাইতে চায় না, মানে financial reason or like, not because they don't have the talent. We're going to remove those barriers, and that's been my job for the last almost year in building policies to make sure no young person is left out in our system. That means every young person in Tower Hamlets who's not in work, who is in training, will be either in training or going to university or in a job. That is my commitment, and I make that to you, the viewers, and for your children.
You'll be held accountable if that doesn't happen.
Absolutely,
and
that
if
is
you
a
are
policy
successful
that
in
we
next
have
election.
announced. Yes, if we get যদি আমরা আমার পার্টি নেক্সট ইলেকশন আমরা পাবলিক সাপোর্ট পাইয়া যদি আমরা আশা করি যদি গভর্নমেন্ট ফর্ম করতাম পারি, লেবার গভর্নমেন্ট ফর্ম করতাম পারি নেক্সট ইয়ার, কনজারভেটিভ পার্টির ওটাইতাম পারি, তখন আমরা 200,000 হাউজিং বিল্ড করবো। আমরা ছেলেমেয়েরা যারা আছে সবার কাছে একটা জবস গ্যারান্টি থাকবো। যারা আনএমপ্লয়েড থাকে তারা ট্রেনিং দেওয়া হইব। এখন একটা সিস্টেম আছে যে 16 আওয়ারের উপরে তারা ট্রেনিংও যাইতে পারত না যদি আনএমপ্লয়েড থাকে না। আমরা এই রুল
I'm just conscious about time. I know আমরা দর্শক আরো নিশ্চয়ই তারা শুনতে চায় এই ব্যাপারে, but let's move on to the immigration issue. We understand that from November there's going to be much stricter immigration on BME community, obviously. What is your take? What Labour government ক্ষমতা আসলে next term, what will be your party's take on immigration?
Well, I hope that people will see the Labour Party's record. We had a fair system. What's important is you have a firm but fair system on immigration. আমরা যখন
টাওয়ার হ্যামলেটসে তো অনেক বাঙালি, সুতরাং টাওয়ার হ্যামলেটসে যারা বাস করে তাদের পরিবার আছে অনেক বাংলাদেশে, তাদের উপরে ইম্প্যাক্ট হবে।
সো আমরা যখন আসলাম এই যে তারা 18,000 পাউন্ড লাগে যদি একটা ফ্যামিলি রিউনিয়ন হয়, ওভারসিজ যদি ব্রিটিশ ন্যাশনাল যারা আছেন তারা যদি পার্টনার আনতে চান, ওয়াইফ ও হাজব্যান্ড বাংলাদেশও বিয়ে হয়, তারা যদি এদেশ আনতে চান তখন 18,000 অ্যাটলিস্ট 18,000 বছরও আর্নিং লাগে। সবার এটা নয়, আমি জানি যে অনেক মানুষে এরকম আর্নিং দেখাইতে পারত না, আর্ন করা না। সো এটা একটা আনফেয়ার পলিসি। এটা আমার পার্টি অলরেডি আমরা এস্টাবলিশ করছি যে it needs to be proportionate. It's not fair to keep families apart for years and years, and they may have children as well, so it means the right to family life is being denied. We have made that very clear. What I would say is to remind people that when we were in power, we introduced immigration rules that were about making sure family life wasn't suffering. This government is putting families at risk by developing a policy that is setting the bar too high. Of course, people need to be able to maintain themselves. Those rules were there when we were in government, when they bring a partner from overseas, and that they shouldn't rely on welfare. That's acceptable, of course, because taxpayers need to know that everybody is making a contribution. British Bangladeshi taxpayers need to know that, as well as other taxpayers mainstream from the wider community. But it needs to be fair, and we have made that very clear through the Home Affairs Committee and through our Shadow Home Secretary, who's highlighted some of those.
What will be Labour take on people যারা illegal আসুন এই দেশে, অনেকদিন তাকে আসুন, তারা 10-12 বছর তাকে অনেকে আসুন illegal? What will be Labour Party's take if you are successful in the next term in terms of সাধারণ ক্ষমা বা amnesty, in terms of all these people?
Well, I think this is something we're going to have to look at when we're in government. So I don't think it would be appropriate for us to start speculating on these issues right now. But what I can say is that if you look back at what we did, we had we did introduce a system where people could after I think it was 12 years, they could make applications to the Home Office, and many people were successful. So I think what's important though is that there's immigration controls to make sure that people who have a right to come here and who want to come here legitimately, for instance, as legitimate students, because it's good for our economy, for people to come and study in our universities. It's a huge economic earner that they do that. But they need to be legitimate, because that will otherwise it will affect. Otherwise, it damage the entire immigration system. So those who are law-abiding and coming here legitimately suffer. So of course we have to be. We have to any government will have to make sure that it maintains its borders, not have open immigration, and that people follow the rule of law.
Will immigration be a significant part in terms of your Labour Party's manifesto at the next election?
Well, our focus, I can't get into the manifesto at this stage, but it will be announced in due course. But I hope what I've done...
Has that been the thinking, that immigration will play a big part? Because আমরা catering industry যদি ধরি, they suffer a lot in terms of the immigration policy for not being able to bring unskilled people and this.
Well, আমরা previous record যেটা এটার উপরে আমি remark করতাম পারবো, কিন্তু সামনে যেটা এটা আমরা party leader যখন decision বানাইবা manifesto commitment, further commitment যতটা আছে এটা পাইবা in due course. কিন্তু just one thing on curry industry. আমরা যখন পাওয়ার আসলাম, আমরা লেবার শর্টেজ রেকগনাইজ করছি, হাই স্কিল যে শেফ যারা আছে তারারে ভিসা সিস্টেম ইন্ট্রোডিউস করা হয়েছে, লো স্কিল যারা আছে যে ওয়েটার যখন ফুল এমপ্লয়মেন্ট আছে লেবার থাকার সময়, লাস্ট লেবার গভর্নমেন্ট যখন সবার চাকরি আছিল, তার জন্য আমরা অ্যালাউ করছি যে দোকানের লাগে। কিন্তু নতুন গভর্নমেন্ট আসার পর তারা সব কিছু ব্লক করছে। So it means that those restaurants that do need high skilled chefs are struggling. Those companies that need high skilled labor are struggling as well. So what we're saying is it's very important to train people up here in our country, but also meet the skill shortage where it exists.
We need to move on because we're nearly towards the end of the show. Obviously, you have opened up that door for British Bangladeshi to be involved in mainstream politics. And surely we would like to see আমরা আরো Bangladeshi MP দেখতে চাই পার্লামেন্টে. So I understand that Labour Party is working towards that.
Yes.
What would be your urge or statement towards our viewers in terms of why it is important to support and why it is important to have more Bangladeshi MPs, whatever party that is from, in the parliament?
Well, first of all, I want to say a big thank you to everyone who supported me over the years and over the last 4 years, and going forward. I hope I will get people's support as I fight the next general election, because what's important is that by breaking down, as you say, the doors that are closed, including the door of Parliament, our national Parliament, I hope that it's given confidence and inspiration to others to follow. And I'm really proud of the fact that my party has already selected 3 British Bangladeshis to fight the next general election. They are Tulip Siddiq, Rupa Haq and Anwar Babul. And I want to see more people from our community and other ethnic minority communities. We have got the largest number of ethnic minority and Muslim candidates as well who are standing, as well as from other faiths, for the Labour Party. আমি জানি যে আমার পার্টি আমরা কমিটমেন্ট আছে যে সব কমিউনিটির রিপ্রেজেন্টেটিভর জরুরি, কারণ যদি আমরা ডিফারেন্ট কমিউনিটি থাকি ঢুকি পার্লামেন্টও তখন ডিফারেন্ট পার্সপেক্টিভ ঢুকাইতে পারি। ফর এক্সাম্পল অন গাজা আমরা যারা ব্রিটিশ মুসলিম এমপি যারা আছেন আমরা যে প্রেশার দেই এটা সব কিছু আপনারা দেখলেন না, কিন্তু behind the scenes as well as in the front, and on many other issues, on housing, on education, on health, যে আমরার পার্সপেক্টিভ কমিউনিটি পার্সপেক্টিভ যেটা আছে একটা মেইনস্ট্রিম পার্সপেক্টিভ আছে, কিন্তু আমরার কমিউনিটির কি কনসার্ন, কি চিন্তা, কি দুঃখ এটা আমরা জানি এটা আমরা ঢুকাইতাম পারি যদি আমরা ডিফারেন্ট কমিউনিটি থেকে রিপ্রেজেন্টেশন থাকে আমরা কমিউনিটি থেকে আরও রিপ্রেজেন্টেশন থাকে ন্যাশনাল মেইন স্ট্রিম পলিটিক্যাল লাইফও তখন এটা আমরা সবার লাগে ভালো হইব not just for our community, but we have an important role to play in this country, in mainstream British society and mainstream politics, because we want to see if Indians, British Indians and British Pakistanis can represent all the different communities and speak up for Britain in the world, why shouldn't we? That's what I'm doing. Absolutely. And I want to break those doors down for other young people to do the same.
Our time is really, really short. আমরা শেষ করার আগে we'll have a 5-second quiz for you. Okay? In Bengali, what have you achieved? Just highlight 5 main points. What have you achieved in these 4 years for the people of Tower Hamlets?
Well,
Bengali, that's
in
your,
Bangla. Okay,
yeah.
okay, in Bangla.
Kita achieve korsoin in last 4 years for the people of Tower Hamlets. Just 5 main points. Kita achieve korsoin.
£100 million ami campaign koria housing or lagi dukaisi Tower Hamlets or bitore. Building schools for future funding jeta eta ami campaign koria dukaisi Amra Bharat Tower Hamlets. That's 2. Ami internationally Rohingya, Burmese Rohingya jarare persecute horar human rights or upore ami campaign koria eta highlight korsi eta ami continually kormo as well as on other foreign policy issues including on Gaza amar party moddho ase jene onek ase jene tara Palestinian community Palestinian manushor lagi support jeta eta amra baraisi অনেক আছে যে অন্য সাইড এটা আমরা আমার কমিটমেন্ট কনস্ট্যান্টলি আমরা থাকবো যে প্যালেস্টিনিয়ান কনফ্লিক্ট যেটা এটা বন্ধ হইতে হবে আমার পার্টি লিড করতে হইব নেক্সট টাইম আমরা যদি গভর্নমেন্ট ফর্ম করি আই নো উই উইল হ্যাভ রিডাবল আওয়ার এফর্টস ফর আ পিস প্রসেস ইন দ্য মিডল ইস্ট Number 5 is something very dear to my heart, which is about aspiration. It's about hope. It's about
Bengali.
It's okay.
Bangla.
Acha, Bangla.
That was part of the quiz.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
Number 5, আমি আশা করি যে যত যারা আমারে সাপোর্ট করছেন, যারা আমারে কনফিডেন্স দিছেন যে পার্লামেন্ট ন্যাশনাল পলিটিক্স ঢুকান লাগি যে তারা আশা করি তারা রেকগনাইজ করা যে এইরকম মেইনস্ট্রিম পাবলিক লাইফও ঢুকলে আমরা লাগি বালা আর আমি আশা করি যে this is not something I can answer as an achievement, but I hope it's an achievement. যে younger generation যারা তারাও এটা দেখিয়া তারা এনকারেজমেন্ট পাইবা আমি জানি আমার পার্টিতে অলরেডি অনেক ঢুকছেন সামনে দিয়ে নেক্সট টাইম আমরা আশা করি অ্যাটলিস্ট 3 জন ব্রিটিশ বাংলাদেশি এমপি আমার পার্টিতে পাইবো আশা করি অন্য পার্টিতে পাইবো অন্য এলাকাত তারা ফিল্ড করবা সো আই হোপ দ্যাট just to round up in English, I hope it's okay, that I hope that on a personal level, by entering politics, by deciding to fight what has been the fight of my life by getting elected, that will give encouragement to others to make a contribution in mainstream British politics, because by doing that what we do is contribute for our community, but also we have a platform to speak up for people around the world, whether in Bangladesh or Gaza or Burma or anywhere in the world. So that is what I hope that I have contributed, raising aspiration among our community and especially young people in our community. I'm
অনেক সময় confused in terms of local issue versus national issue. How careful we have to be.
Yeah. Next election jeta hoibo eta এই choice হইল গিয়া between a conservative government or a Labour government যদিন conservative government আরবার যায় তখন আমরা যতটুকু আমরা অ্যাচিভ করছি লেবার গভর্নমেন্ট ঢোকার পরে স্কুলস হসপিটালস মানে টাওয়ার হ্যামলেটস আস্তা দেশটাকে বড় একটা হসপিটাল আমরা বানাইছি £1 বিলিয়ন দিয়া এরকম যে সাপোর্ট যেটা আছে রিসোর্স যেটা ঢোকানি হয়েছে এটা সব কিছু ধ্বংস হইব আমরা ছেলেমেয়েরার ফিউচার ধ্বংস হইব আমরা হাউজিং সিচুয়েশন যেটা এটা আরও খারাপ হইব যতটুকু দোজ আর দ্য চয়েসেস যদি আমরা ফিউচার চাই তখন আশা করি যে গভর্নমেন্ট চেঞ্জ করার জরুরি একটা লেবার গভর্নমেন্টের জরুরি
Thank you very much for giving us time, Rushnara. দর্শক আমরা আজকে কথা বললাম রুশনারা আলী এমপি ফর টাওয়ার হ্যামলেটসের বেতনালগিন এবং বো এলাকা থেকে আপনার অনেক কথা জানলাম কথা হলো অনেকক্ষণ দর্শক আশা করি আজকের অনুষ্ঠান ভালো লেগেছে আগামী শুক্রবারের অনুষ্ঠান দেখবার আমন্ত্রণ রইল গুড লাক বেস্ট উইশেস
থ্যাংক ইউ আসসালামু আলাইকুম
শুভরাত্রি আজকের অনুষ্ঠান দেখবার জন্য ধন্যবাদ সবাইকে